Hello music makers, welcome back. Some of you have been requesting I break down certain sounds from the videos, and where possible I have been replying with little short videos on how they were made. As long as I reply on my phone, I'm able to reply directly with a short, not on the desktop for some reason though. Anyway, that's all fine and dandy if the sound is simple enough to explain in 60 seconds, and it's fine to just film my computer screen and use the internal mic on my phone because the person requesting the sound has already heard the full quality version in the original video and was obviously convinced by its authenticity. However, for people discovering these shorts for the first time, it comes across as if I have been taking sound design requests, and obviously they have some requests of their own. So in those cases, it's going to require a fresh video. I can't just film my screen of what I've already done. So I'm going to attempt a couple of new requests and film the process. Let's go. Mike Tucker asked, "This one's been bugging me for a while. Can you figure out how Rodriguez Jr. made the Swirly Sqirrly synth hook in his remix of Eli and Fur's Night Blooming Jasmine? Crazy ask. Cry laughing emoji. I don't know the track, but let's give it a go, shall we?" Okay, here's the track in question. I've brought it in. It's 120 beats per minute. I've found a couple of sections where our so-called Squirly Sqirrly synth appears. Starts at this break here. It carries on throughout the break, but a vocal comes in and masks it somewhat here, making it harder to hear. But it does drop with it, and it's brighter here. Okay, so straight away I can identify that is probably a sawtooth or close to a sawtooth waveform. How do I know that? Well, ear training from many years working with synthesizers, but I do have a slight advantage over someone starting today, and I can pass on that advantage to you. It's because in earlier synths, their oscillators only had a few waveform options. The first synthesizers, not that I was around back then, but they made sound from waveforms created with electrical voltage. And as such, the only shapes that could really be produced were sine waves, triangle, sawtooth, and square waves. And as you might imagine, all of the earliest digital synths that were released emulated these as well. So anyone playing with synths in earlier years, or even as late as the 2000s, which is when I discovered all of this, would get used to hearing these waveforms a lot. Now, these days, if you're starting your music production journey, any synth you get your hands on is going to shower you with 1,000 waveform options, many of them a lot more complex. And I would argue these complex waveforms have much less of an easily identifiable sonic signature than the original lot. However, many sounds are still built upon these basic building blocks of sound, so I recommend you still learn to get used to the sounds of the original waveforms: sine, triangle, sawtooth, and square. Being able to spot those, or even rule them out, is going to fast forward your sound design capabilities tremendously. Let's go through them, and you'll hear why I think this is going to be a sawtooth. Okay, let's program in some notes first. Now, I have already determined this track is in F minor, and I can hear that the chord progression is a 6-7-1. Now, this video is about sound design, not harmony, but if you want to know how to do that, you do that by training something called relative pitch. I'll leave a couple of links in the description. So I figured out that the bass line is doing this. It starts on C sharp, then D sharp, and resolves on F. So that's what's going on down there. As for the actual synth, I don't know what it's playing yet. I can hear it's running up and down. It's playing what we call arpeggios. Arpeggios are just broken up chords. I'll figure the notes out later, but those bass notes are going to give me some good clues as to the chords it's arpeggiating. For now though, just to demonstrate the waveforms, I'm going to draw in the notes of F minor as an arpeggio, start on F, and just keep drawing all the notes of F minor downwards. Something like that. So what you're hearing now is the sine wave. This is a triangle. Sawtooth. Square. So the sine wave is very pure. The triangle wave was similar. In fact, I hear the triangle wave as a midpoint between the sine and the square. And then the sawtooth, well, that's the buzzy one, like a saw. If I play back the drop, we should recognize that sawtooth vibe now. As for that squirreliness, well, that's coming from the filter, or more specifically, the resonance of a filter. I can hear it's probably a steep filter because of how dull the sound is in the break. And we're going to increase the resonance quite a bit. And just by sweeping this up and down, we should get similar vibes to the original track. So it's going to be something like that. However, to truly dial this in, to get an actual like-for-like comparison, I prefer to recreate a bit of the original track, certainly work out the notes of the original line, and possibly some of the rest of the track too. That way we can compare properly. Okie dokie, future me here. We finally got somewhere. And this is the line to the best of my ability. Something close to that. Anyway, here's how it sounds in context. So, let me show you where the sound ended up after I dialed it in a little bit. So the key to this sound is legato. You'll see here I've overlapped all the notes. In musical terms, legato is when the notes are joined together. In synth terms, it doesn't recognize legato unless they are slightly overlapping though. But the reason we do this is so that when we play a sequence of notes, a phrase if you will, the envelopes on the synth do not reset. And that's key for this envelope here. It's been sent to our filter and our volume. So with each of those arpeggio runs, it's going to give us a volume swell and a filter swell. Like that. Now, if I turn legato off, you'll see the envelope tries to start on every note. Re-triggering every note. That's how envelopes normally work, but it's not what we want here. We want this. There we go. As you can see, a resonant filter as predicted. I went with Vital's ladder filter for this one. That's the Moog style filter. It sounded the most squelchy of all the options. I have set the LFO to sweep that filter up and down automatically. So even without these, the filter is on the move. As we build to the drop, I am automating the filter cutoff so it brightens overall regardless of what the envelopes and LFOs are doing. I have used the random LFO to add a little bit of variation to the filter cutoff. It's very slight, but it means the filter is not in the same place every time, giving it more of a human performance feel. I'm not sure if that's what's on the track or if that is a human performance, but that's how I've achieved it here anyway. I'm also doing the random thing with the filter resonance as well, so that's on the move too. One very important thing I forgot to mention. For the legato mode to work, we need to be limited to one note at a time, one voice. So that when those notes overlap, instead of playing both notes and letting one overlap the other, it forces the note to the newest one. If I let this play polyphonically, meaning multiple notes at a time, you'll hear it get messier because the notes overlap and you'll see that the envelopes start resetting again. If we go back to one note, that's why monosynths behave very differently to polysynths and are great for leads. Right, what else was there? For effects, we have a little distortion, delay, reverb. This filter is just here to make sure things don't get too bright. As I noticed in the original track, it's a very warm sound. So this is just static and taking off the extreme bright top end. And again, in the name of warmth, we have a little low-mid EQ bump. Nothing too specific, again, just trying to get closer to the reference. Also on there, you'll see Dragonfly Reverb for a little bit extra atmos, Sidekick for sidechain effect, and we're swapping the octave with the pitch plugin there as well. As for the other sound designs, let's quickly go over those. So the bass. First of all, you'll notice this chromatic line, meaning all the notes in between. It's using those as passing notes to the main bass notes. And the way you get that kind of growl is we have two saws, but one is down an octave. That's all it is, really. Two saws with one down an octave. Let's hear it without. I've got them mostly locked in phase, so they're not cancelling each other out. You'll see this one does have 14% variation on it, though. Just subtle variation. If we play around with the overall phase, you should hear a big difference, though. You can hear down here, they do cancel. Too thin. So I settled around here. This sounded best to me. And the sine wave is just here because I'm being lazy. Normally I would create a separate sub-track, but I was doing this as quick as I could. So that's there to control my sub-levels. So that's not necessary to the character of the sound. If you saw my video on how I process bass, you'll know I normally have a separate subtrack doing that, so it can be sidechained separately. As for other sounds, we have this, which is just a sine wave. A little bit of fall off on the envelope, so it does have some attack. Otherwise, the notes just blended into one another. So slightly percussive roll. This LFO is sent to pan, so it's making it go left to right. Tiny amount of randomness on pitch to give it some motion. As for effects, we have delay, and this is downsampling. I could hear aliasing in the original, which is a result of sample crushing. The envelope is also sent to this amount, adding to the percussive vibe. As for what it's playing, those are the chords I determined. I could hear it follow the bass line for these two and then dropping to the fifth. And it's droning on notes 1 and 4, which is interesting. Good for a little bit of tension, as note 4 isn't in chord 1. So that's leaving us with a suspended fourth chord. Then we have a few pads. As far as I can tell, it's holding this chord, which is notes 7, 9, 3 and 5. Essentially an F minor ninth, but without the F. That will be provided by the bass. I needed an even brighter pad for the drop, so I've layered that with this one. Both pads coming from the free Spitfire Labs, by the way. As you might expect for an atmospheric pad, lots of reverb. This pad is heavily constrained to the mid-range frequencies until it opens up for the last drop. There seems to be a choir voice, a held note in there. This is the closest sound I could get. It's just literally holding the C. Of all the choirs I tried, this free Virgin choir came closest. Occasionally there are these accents. What I like to call Blade Runner style synths. If you haven't seen either of the Blade Runner films, please do so. That's just lots of voices of a saw wave in unison. Not too detuned though. That would sound a little too trance, like this. So keeping the tuning quite close. Sounding quite close to a string section like that. And we have an envelope swelling both volume and filter. Pretty subtle, and obviously reverb. And removing all the muddy frequencies with the EQ there. So there we go. It's a simple sawtooth underneath, but lots of moving parts in the end. Now, the good news is Eli and Fur and Rodriguez Jr. will receive their due royalties from this video. Unfortunately for us, there is no way of splitting that with the video creator, so they will receive 100% of this video's revenue. Which means I have to ask for your support in the form of likes, subscriptions, leave me any comments or questions, or there's a link in the description to buy me a coffee. I will link the sounds in the description also, and until next week, I'll see you in the comments. Bye bye.